might be there as an attendee because sometimes she calls into that number too.
Okay, I need to get her phone number. Hold on 1 second.
Hi, Alex. I'm not going to ask you to talk about EBCE or the CAC member stuff because we really don't have a spot for it here, but I would like to know what's happening so I can ask the board to get on it when I do my little report on Wednesday. So just email me when you have a minute, tell me where things are.
Happy to do so. Thanks, Mary.
Appreciate it. Thanks.
Everybody,
Hi, Jane.
how's it going?
And Cynthia's here. Good. All right, so I am going to officially start the CAC meeting of 3:15. It's 6:02. May I have roll call, please?
Yes, Member Eldred. Member Eldred?
Yeah, present.
Member Landry?
Present.
Member Pacheco? Member Padilla?
Present.
Vice Chair Frank?
Present.
And Chair Sutter?
Present.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. So our next item of public comments, as usual, this period's reserved for anyone of the public who wants to say something to the CAC that's not on our agenda. Do we have any speaker slips?
There are no speaker slips.
Okay, that was a quick item. Let me double check. Sometimes people raise hands as opposed to, nope, I don't see any raised hands. So I'm going to move on to item C3, which is approval of the minutes from February 16th. So members, do we have, pardon?
Motion to approve.
Motion to approve. Thank you, Jane. Do I hear a
Second,
second?
Eldred.
Member Eldridge does the second, and
Yes.
Cynthia is somehow dropped off of here. Is she over in the attendee side? I don't know if that 993 number is her.
Let me just allow. Member Landry, I have unmuted your phone number. If you can confirm that this is you.
Cynthia, are you a 993 number? If so, you're on mute.
Can you confirm that this is Member Landry? Well, while we're waiting for confirmation,
Yeah.
I could perhaps, should I go through, should I do the,
Well, I would like to know, are there any suggested updates from the committee on the hearing? None. Please do call roll on that.
Member Eldridge? Member Eldridge?
Yes, sorry, I'm having internet glitches here.
Member Landry? We'll wait to see when she rejoins us. Member Pacheco? Member Padilla?
Yeah. Yes.
Yes. Vice Chair Frank?
Yes.
And Chair Sutter?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Great. Thank you. And I don't see any hands raised. We typically don't have speaker slips for approval of minutes. So I'm going to move on. Item C4 is the CAC chair report. Just to keep everybody apprised, we had this metrics initiative that Jane and I have been working on since last July. It's been a bit of a slow start, but actually since November, we've met with JP 7 different times now, and we're continuing now to have bi-weekly meetings with him. And I'm not planning to kind of give a full rundown of everything that we've talked about at this meeting, but I wanted to let you know that is going on. And I feel like we're making good progress on some of that. I do plan to bring a more thorough kind of review and let everybody know what we've been talking about and bring that information back to the CAC next month. The second thing I want to do is kind of cede a little bit of my time to Anna Olivia. She had requested time last month to talk about a survey that she's doing as part of her, I don't know if it's a thesis, Anna Olivia, the work that you're doing as part of the Vermont Law project. And so if you want to mention that to folks, please do.
Yeah, I would love to. So as folks may know, I am in a Master's of Environmental Law program right now, and I am working on my master's project, which is in energy law. I have a concentration in that. And it's been approved for me to focus on CCAs in particular, and we are creating a body of educational materials for specifically targeting board members and community advisory committee members for the state of California, for at least this part of this project. And the first step of that, well, the next step of that anyways, is to send out a survey, which I believe I mentioned last month really quickly, that asks two questions, like how familiar are you with these, I think it's like 10 topic areas, although I'm working on trimming them down a little bit from 10. And how important do you think it is to learn more about it? It's a really simple survey. I'm trying to format it in the simplest way possible. And I wanted to do a test run of it before it gets sent out to a broader audience. And I was hoping that our CAC members would be willing to take it, because we all have different knowledge areas and we've all been involved for a while. So it would also be available to any members of our public or staff or whoever wanted to take it. But this is really just a quick sample so I can take a look at the data and make sure that the way I'm getting it back is in a useful format and can be analyzed. So we will be, Mary has very graciously been helping me. We'll be sending it out to EBCE members who are willing to take it. Really only take a few minutes, and after that we'll be doing a kind of a larger launch to our board members, but other CCM members as well. So any questions on that, I'm really happy to answer them.
I would say, folks, the other CAC members, there's only 4 of us here, that just expect an email from Anna Olivia. And as near as I know, because this is not CAC specific, I don't think there's a Brown Act issue going on. Adrian, if you have any knowledge of whether or not, or Alex, whoever between you two, if you think that there's a problem with Anna Olivia sending something out like this to all of the CAC members, please let myself and Anna Olivia know. Personally, it has nothing to do with our CAC. It's her master's thesis project, so I don't think there's a problem. But you guys may know better.
We checked with council too, and as far as we can tell, there won't be anything specific, but I will check with staff.
Okay.
So thank you for that.
Great.
No.
Thanks.
I think if it's BCC'd, you're safe.
Okay. Well, she's going to be asking them to do a survey, so there's not even going to be sequential or whatever it's called when you daisy chain folks. But
and it's anonymous, and it doesn't involve our CCA or any decisions that we're making.
Right. So I'm sure it's fine. Cynthia's hand is up. Cynthia, can you unmute yourself? Yeah.
Yes, thank you. First of all, I know you went by me, but on the minutes, I was having internet issues. So, I am, if it's permissible, I do vote for the minutes. I don't know if I can do anything about that because the vote was already taken, but I was having internet issues. Secondly, regarding the chair report, when you bring that back to us, will we be able to add comments or edits to that report?
You mean about the metrics initiative?
Yes.
No, but mainly because all I'm going to be doing is telling you what we did. So,
Okay.
so you'll have the opportunity to say, oh, great. How about, did you think about this? Or what I'm planning to do is say, and now we're going to bring this back to the CAC to talk about. All the thing I'm going to do is tell you what happened. And so you really can't change that because that wasn't part of it. You weren't part of it. But I'll be bringing it back so everybody knows what we've been doing.
All right. So not to belabor it. So are we okay, well, I'll just wait and see what the are we using this report to advise the JPA, or are we expanding the metrics? Are we clarifying the metrics? Maybe you can just remind me one sentence what we're doing again.
Sure. The metric initiative that Jane and I started had 3 goals. One was to bring forward what has occurred in stage 1 up till now, the stage 1 of the LDBP. The
Okay.
other was to document the metrics that were going on right now. And the third was to describe what is occurring in terms of social and equity metrics. One of the things, though, I mean, none of this is going to go to the board or anybody until any actions would be taken by the CAC. This is not unilateral. This is just some work being done in the background to be brought back to the group to think and consider as things move forward. So.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification. Thank you.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to move on to C5, which is our legislative update. I don't know, Melissa, I know you're here. I don't know if that means that you're going to be presenting.
Yes.
Okay, so for those of us on the CAC, this is our only action item tonight. And if we feel we want to change any of the positions that Melissa's putting forward in terms of their staff suggested support or non-support on the laws that she has put forward, then we can take action, but we don't necessarily have to. So with that caveat, Melissa.
All right. Good evening, everybody. So it's been actually a while since I've done a legislative update because 2020 was such a bum year with the legislature. But in 2021, now that everyone's figured out how to work remotely, including the legislature, it's quite a different situation. So I'm going to be going through a few things today. I wanted to just remind everybody about the legislative program that was adopted back in 2018. I wanted to go through some, the bill position we have taken so far and some recommended bill positions. And then also I'm going to highlight some other bills that we are watching. In general, we are watching upwards of 70 bills right now. So it's more than I could present today. I'm really trying to show the board the highlights, the bills that we may care more about. But having said that, I would caveat it's still very, very early in the legislative cycle. And a lot of bills won't really get their meat and may not have the pieces we really care about until they're in the second house. So given that it's very early stage, given that we don't always know who bill sponsors are or what the language is going to be, this is kind of the current state of events, if you will. So next slide, please. All right, so you may recall that back in 2018, the board had asked us to put together a legislative program, which we did, and it goes through a couple things. One is it lays out some legislative principles, and the 3 legislative principles it lays out are accelerating decarbonization, promoting local development, and stabilizing community choice. And so the idea is that these principles guide our participation in the legislative process. In addition to the legislative principles, we have some more specific policy positions in a few areas. Next slide, please. And so then you'll see them here, non-bypassable charges, disadvantaged communities, environmental sustainability, finance and educational, neighborhood and social services. And with the agenda packet with this presentation, you should have the attachment of the full legislative program. So please do feel free to read that if you would like to remind yourself. I really wanted to make sure the board was aware of this, given that we have some new board members and not everybody was there back in 2018. But you know, this program really guides our thought process as we look at legislation to figure out how it intersects with EBC's interests. Next slide, please. So first, just, you know, some key deadlines for the 2021 legislative year. Bill introduction deadline passed back in February. The next big deadline is the policy committees have to move the fiscal bills to fiscal committees in the first house by the end of April, and non-fiscal committees to the floor by early May. And then fiscal committees have to move those bills to the floor in mid-May, and by June, each house has to pass the bills introduced in that first house. By June 15th, the budget bill has to be passed. And then in July, we will have the policy committees meeting and reporting bills in the second house. So as you can see, that's when things get really exciting. And then by August 27th, the fiscal committees have to move bills to the floor. And then September 10th is the last day for each house to pass bills. And then this year, October 10th is the last day for the governor to sign or veto bills. So as I mentioned before, we're very early in on the process right now, but a ton of bills have been introduced. And so it's our job at this stage to start to sort through them and to learn a little bit more about them. Next slide, please. So we saw a few key energy themes emerging in the bills that we've looked at so far, and I thought I'd just kind of give you the high-level summary. It's really these following themes: a lot of bills on building decarbonization this year, also focus on clean energy and storage, and we see that kind of in the context of technologies, counting rules for compliance purposes, and tariffs. We see bills on de-energization. No surprise there. I think the de-energization events that have been occurring, you know, annually now still affect communities and are something that the legislature is still concerned about. Grid reliability and resource adequacy, again, not a surprise, given the rolling blackouts from last summer. Grid reliability, I think, is really top of mind, and both the regulatory and the legislative sides have been very focused on how to prevent a recurrence of the blackouts. Central procurement continues to emerge as a theme. And then finally, we've seen a little bit more than we have in the past about energy equity. So next slide, please. Okay, so far we've only adopted one bill position. SB 612 is a bill authored by Portantino, and it's actually a Cal CCA sponsored bill. And this bill accomplishes largely what the PCIA Working Group 3 agreement would have accomplished. That agreement was filed at the PUC back in February of 2020, and the CPUC has yet to act on it. And so hence now you're seeing the legislature pushing for the solution. It is essentially requiring the electrical corporations to annually offer for the following year an allocation of the products that arise from the legacy resources that CCAs and other departed load customers are currently paying for. So through the PCIA, we have to pay the above market costs of those legacy resources, but we don't get anything in return. PG&E has offered us in certain years an allocation, but it's not something that we are entitled to today. It's something that's kind of at PG&E's will. And so it's not something we can count on either. And so this would change that and make sure that it's something that the utility is required to offer us each year. And it would also require the CPUC to recognize and account for the value of all the products in the legacy portfolio when they set the PCIA. You may recall when we received the PCIA decision back in 2018, that one of the things that the PUC does not account for is the value of greenhouse gas-free energy, even though that energy trades at a premium. And then finally, this bill would require the investor and utilities to conduct an annual solicitation to see if any of the parties to their long-term contracts might be willing to seek modifications to reduce the total procurement costs. And it's up to those third parties whether or not they want to have those conversations, but it requires the utilities to solicit and to consider any offers they might receive, which today they really don't have the incentive to do. So that's the bill. It was, when we took a support position, we wanted to take one early on as a CCA supporting the Cal CCA sponsored bill. Cal CCA has been working to get a lot of co-authors on the bill. Last I heard, they were up to 18 co-authors, and they're continuing to seek additional co-authors. So there's been some good support both in the Senate and the Assembly among the co-authors. And so by being able to take a support position early on, that's something that we can then go to our own Alameda County delegation to encourage even more co-authors from Alameda County and from San Joaquin County. So that's exciting. The bill was amended on the 9th of March, which is what we had expected. In fact, when we took the position, it was only an intent bill, but we had the amendment language that had been widely circulated. And so that's how it was amended essentially. Next slide, please. So now I'm going to get into some recommended bill positions, and I have a fair number of bills already on for recommendations. I'm going to first go through Assembly and then Senate. I think what's worth pointing out here is that what you will see is a lot of support positions. I think at this early stage, we tend not to take any opposed positions for a couple reasons. One is that often if we are opposed, Cal CCA is opposed, and so sometimes it can be helped to build that broader coalition. The other thing is that often at this stage, we're still trying to learn more about the bill and have conversations with folks before coming out with such a strong position as opposed. So this is kind of the time to get some of those early supports in. It's not necessarily the time we want to take a hard stance against bills. I think that will come later. And the other thing you will note is that whenever I have an author that is part of EBCE's legislative delegation, I've colored them blue just to kind of point out that they are a local, they're one of our representatives in Sacramento. So I have on this first slide a bunch of bills. AB 427, authored by Bauer Cahan. This one would require the CPUC to establish some rules governing the intersection of demand response, energy storage, including customer-sided, distributed generation plus storage, and RA. It's a fairly technical bill, and it seeks to make it easier for demand response providers and energy storage providers doing behind the meter to provide RA. So, we think that this is a really positive bill and worth supporting. AB 525 is the next bill. This one would require the California Energy Commission to develop a plan to achieve 10,000 megawatts of offshore wind by 2040. And it would require the CPUC to include offshore wind in its IRP. Again, I think this one fits nicely with our goals to be investing in more renewables and to have more renewables available to California. And the nice thing about offshore wind is that it is actually a more reliable source of wind. So it's something that, to the extent that more can be achieved in California, that gives us even better procurement options in the future. So again, this is one that I think meshes well with EBCE's interests. And I would note that Senator Eggman, who is one of our representatives in the Senate, is a co-author on this bill. AB 843 by Agia Curry would allow CCAs to enter into biomat contracts. This is a bioenergy tariff that's run through the CPUC, and they could recover those costs through an existing charge that all customers pay for the biomat program. EBCE is not actually looking to do any biomat contracts at this time, but this bill is sponsored by a group of joint CCAs. And I think the reason that it's in EBCE's interest to support is because the bill helps to establish a very positive precedent that to the extent customers are paying non-bypassable charges for policy procurement, that CCAs can be one of the folks that implement that, and that we could be a procurer. It's not always necessarily going to be the investor-owned utility that the commission needs to turn to get the procurement done. AB 1087 by Chu would establish environmental justice community resilience hubs, and it would essentially do this by reallocating funding from the California Climate Credit towards a streamlined grant program for climate resiliency improvements to buildings that are important buildings for the community and serve as hubs. And so this would fund different building upgrades, including improved insulation, clean energy microgrid installations for backup power, air filtration systems to combat wildfire smoke. So this one, I think, is an interesting bill. And the reason I put support if amended is because we'd like to have a conversation with the author's office and the sponsors about how EBCE and other CCAs can serve as one of the administrators. Right now, the way that the language is written, it really looks for a third-party administrator overseen by the CPUC or the investor-owned utility to run the program. And we think that CCAs could actually run these programs quite well, given our community relationships and our ability to do this kind of work. So, so that's something that we would like to push for with this bill. AB 1539 by Levine would require the Energy Commission's EV infrastructure training course to remain available in an online format indefinitely. It's a very simple bill, but we are actually looking at relying on this EV infrastructure training course as we roll out our Cal EVIP funding. So it's a training course that contractors have to take, and you have to have a certain % of your contractors certified through this training course. Given that we find a lot of value in that course, we don't want it to sunset as it's currently scheduled to in 2024. And then this last one is a little bit weird. It doesn't actually have a bill number yet because it is likely to be heard in committee as a budget bill, and a draft is not yet in print. However, we've been in conversations with the bill sponsors. Ting is the author and sits on the budget committee. And the concept here would be to reallocate unused funds from the New Solar Homes Partnership Program and apply them to 2 new programs that are going to be administered by the CEC for residential building decarbonization, and also grants to local governments to adopt automated permitting systems, which can actually help speed up the building decarbonization process. So, so this one, I think the team really felt like this would be really great to get more funding into residential building decarbonization. And so it's something that we support. And, if somehow what went into print was substantially different than what I've described, of course, we could withdraw our support position. But this is one where it would be nice to have a support position when we go to the committee so that we can give an oral support at the committee hearing. Next slide, please. Okay, so now moving on to the Senate. So SB 31 by Cortez would require the Energy Commission to identify and implement programs to promote existing and new building decarbonization. So you're starting to see that building decarb theme. It would also authorize expending federal funds for these projects, and would require the CEC under the EPIC program to award funds for projects that benefit electric ratepayers and develop new building decarb technologies and investments. So again, this is a bill that we think would really help with funding for building decarbonization. SB 52 is a bill by Dodd that would expand the definition of sudden and severe energy shortage to include de-energization or PSPS events, And that would enable them to qualify as a state of emergency and a local emergency, which gives our state and local governments more powers to help deal with that emergency. SB 99, also by Dodd, is called the Community Energy Resilience Act, and it would require the Energy Commission to develop and implement a grant program for local governments to develop community energy resilience plans. We think this is something our local governments could benefit from, and so would support implementing of this new grant program. SB 345 by Becker would require the CPC to establish common definitions of non-energy benefits and incorporate those into essentially program evaluations for different distributed energy resource programs. This is something that actually is somewhat akin to our LDBP and to our focus on community benefits, because we're not just now looking at the energy financial benefits, but we're looking at how do the projects benefit the communities in other ways, including environmental justice, economic. So this is actually, I think, something that our folks are feeling like has been long coming, and we'd be excited to support. SB 551 by Stern would establish a California Electric Vehicle Authority in the governor's office that would be responsible for coordinating state agency activities to deploy more electric vehicles and zero emission charging infrastructure, also to create funding and financing tools to support the deployments and to prioritize equity in those investments. And this is actually a bill that we worked with the transportation electrification folks to think through the concept of how we could do better coordination as a state. And this is what the team came up with. And so we were excited to see Stern pick up this idea and run with it in a bill. And therefore think it would be great for us to support, particularly because there's a lot of funding and there's a lot of responsibility for electric vehicles, but it's really dispersed throughout the state, throughout the different government entities. And so this would be a nice way to bring all of that together and hopefully more effectively help with the deployment. Okay, the next slide, please. So actually, I guess I would have a question here for the chair. Would you like me to continue going through each of these highlights, given that I've just gone through the bill positions that we want to take?
No, I appreciate you asking that, Melissa. My preference is to not go through each of these. I think that these are all watch positions and you're going to be seeing if you want to support or not. So I think unless you have any highlights that you want to bring forward on these two that we're going to watch, I would probably kind of take it back to the CAC to have thoughts on what you presented so far.
Okay, great.
Sounds like nothing specific on here, so.
There's a lot on here, but nothing warranting immediate attention and action, I think.
Mary,
Yes.
I would like to know a little more about this AB 1088, if it's okay.
AB 1088,
Mays is the author.
please. Sure.
Okay.
So can you tell us about that one, Melissa?
Absolutely. So AB 1088 is a bill sponsored by San Diego Gas and Electric, and it would establish a California Procurement Authority that in some ways would do a lot of what I think CCAs were looking for in the last couple of years in the procurement space when you talk about a central buyer, which is to really fill in procurement gaps if the load serving entities lack adequate resource adequacy or integrated resource planning resources. So the load serving entity or the CCA would still be first in line to do its procurement, but if somehow it couldn't do all of the procurement that is needed, this authority would fill in the gaps. But interestingly, the authority would also serve as a provider of last resort if an investor-owned utility wanted to exit retail service. So one of the bills that passed recently was SB 520 by Hertzberg. And that bill essentially requires the investor-owned utility to serve as the provider of last resort, or POLR for short. And it makes it very, very challenging for an investor and utility to get out of that function or for another entity to take on that function. So here you actually have this new authority being created to take on that function, which would enable the investor and utility exit. This makes sense in the context of the fact that San Diego Gas and Electric has been indicating for quite some time their desire to get out of the retail service business. So this would enable them to do that, but it would also enable any other investor and utility to also leave retail service should they desire to do so. It's on the watch list right now, in part because we still have a lot of questions about this bill, including who would this authority be and how would this authority be governed, and how would it be created? How would it determine what the procurement requirements are, and how would it work with load serving entities to do that? And this is also a bill that CalCCA is watching. So we're all very interested in this bill, but I wouldn't say we're ready to take a position yet.
Great, thank you. So are there any other CAC members that have a question about one of the items that are under the watch? If so, please raise your hand. Cynthia, I see that. And then I'm going to ask if there's any public comments on that. So Cynthia, do you have a question on one of the items that are on the watch list?
Well, I actually had a question, not on the watch list, but on the presentation on another bill that's not on the watch list.
Okay, can you hold that for a minute? And I want to go to the public to see if there's any comments on what's been presented, and then I'm going to bring it back to the CAC for discussion.
That's fine. Thank you.
Thank you, Cynthia.
Yes, we have one person on our public speaker list, Jessica Tovar. Jessica Tovar, I am unmuting you now.
Hi, everyone. Jessica Tovar of East Bay Clean Power Alliance. Well, first on AB 427, we wanted to say that we support this bill that requires CPUC to develop a process for behind the meter renewable resources to be considered as resource adequacy. For SB 612, we do not support because though SB 612 might reduce PCIA charges, it doesn't address the main problem with the PCIA, which is that it's not in the best interest of utility customers in California. PCIA was intended to be a temporary and decreasing charge on community choice customers to make sure that investor-owned utility customers did not have to pay for the excess energy due to decreasing load, but PCIA fee has actually increased 600% since its first implementation back in 2010. The effect of that increase is largely responsible for East Bay Community Energy's profits decreasing from almost 68 million in 2019 to a hopeful 3 million in 2020. Because the PCIA primarily represents above market costs of energy contracts and generation sources, it also represents higher rates being paid by bundled customers, with the difference being that community choice customers do not even use that energy. The PCIA, or the ever-increasing PCIA, has now become a threat to community choice, which would not be in the best interest of any utility customers, as community choice community CCAs, community choice aggregates, have been able to provide cleaner energy at lower costs. So we are not in support of SB 612, and that is it for legislative. I'm sure there'll be more as these bills change moving towards August. Thanks.
Thank you, Jessica. Anybody else, Adrian? Nope, I didn't hear you, but I think I heard you say no. So,
No one else on the speaker list.
okay, thank you. So I'm going to take it back to you, Cynthia.
Yes, I also had a question about the bill, believe it's 612 that we are supporting. So is the intent of that bill part of the intent, Melissa?
Hmm. Cynthia, we lost you. Do you guys hear Cynthia?
No.
Okay. She must be having pretty spotty internet.
That is absolutely correct. I am having spotty.
Okay.
Okay, can you hear me
Oh, yeah.
again?
Now we
Okay.
can,
Okay, so Melissa, can you go over what 612 again is designed to do? I was curious whether that was a mechanism for PG&E to get out of its long-term contracts, and what would be the benefit of that legislation for CCAs? Again, please.
sure. So the utilities have more resources than they need. And some of those resources are valuable because they include things like renewable energy and greenhouse gas free energy, which we've gotten from PG&E in the past. So this would require the utility in a yearly process to provide a proportional share of those attributes to all of the customers that are paying for the over market costs. So in essence, it's saying, okay, well, we're already paying for the fact that the utility invested in these resources. Our customers should have an entitlement to some of those resources to be able to use to meet our own requirements. So that's the benefit to us. We're getting some of what we're paying for, which today we're not. We're paying but not getting anything. And then specifically with respect to the utility renegotiating contracts, again, it depends on whether the project developer wants to renegotiate an agreement with the utility. But I think the idea is that the utility, again, has a lot more of these agreements than it needs. And if you had a developer that maybe wants to stop selling to PG&E and start selling to someone else, they can have that conversation.
Any other comments from the CSC? And Olivia. Please unmute yourself if you have a question, want to ask. Still don't hear you, Anne Olivia.
Mary?
Now I hear you.
Oh, good. Sorry, I didn't even hear you call my name. My internet really is special. Thank you so much for that presentation. It's fascinating. I'm really excited to see the increase in interest in building decarbonization. That's exceptionally hopeful, and the increased focus on equity. I had a question regarding the resource adequacy bill. Does it look like they're doing anything to require providers of resource adequacy to actually bid it into the market when we need it, or not? I know that was one of the issues that happened with the blackouts, and that there wasn't a requirement that they actually provide us the energy when they need it. That's why they were exporting it during that time, which was just awesome. But I'm wondering if you see anything that's addressing that specific aspect of the resource adequacy management or regulatory issues right now.
So I would say no, it doesn't really deal with that aspect of the reliability challenges. It's really much more focused on how can we ensure that programs that are working as behind the meter can start to garner RA credit. So it's another way to ensure that they have a financing stream to bring those kinds of projects online and to also help with our reliability needs.
I do love that and absolutely support that. That's great. If there's a place to push for addressing that issue, I think it would do us a world of good too, because it's a huge. I also have questions around the PCIA bill. Does that would it in any way provide financial incentive for utility-owned generation that is not, like, is currently considered in excess, like they have too much of this energy? Does it provide a financial incentive for them to continue above market generation? Or does it address that in some way?
It doesn't address that, and in fact, that's just one of the big problems with the current structure of the PCIA, and one that the commission essentially made worse in their decision in 2018, because there used to be a 10-year rule for utility-owned generation to be in the PCIA, and they took that away and said, no, it should be in the PCIA indefinitely. And so that's been a really hard nut to crack. There's not a good way, given that decision, to pull the utility-owned generation out of the PCIA, and it's not something that the legislature is at appetite to do.
That would make me really hesitant to support that. Boy, that's complicated. So if I understand correctly, this would allow us to be abused slightly less while further legitimizing the source of abuse.
I wouldn't say it legitimizes a source of abuse, but I would say that this makes the PCIA hurt a little bit less and be less painful for our customers.
And then, but it would still say that this was a legitimate way for them to deal with their excess generation. Yeah, I think that it could hinder our ability to try and fight its inclusion in the PCA or its existence. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Olivia. Monica?
Thank you, Melissa. It was a nice summary. Just one question on the PCIA bill, or SB 16, whatever it's called. I don't keep track of numbers. How does that work with the CPUC's Working Group 3, which was supposed to essentially resolve the issue on how to optimize the utilities portfolios? Does that just kind of go away if this thing gets passed?
It would either go away or it would implement the legislation. I mean, the proposal before the commission is very, very similar to the legislation, and they've just failed to act.
Uh-huh.
So it's been 13 months and there's no sign of a proposed decision.
But does it dissolve the working group, or does it keep that intact?
I don't think the bill language specifically says that the commission has to dissolve the working group, but the legislation would control. So the PUC couldn't undo what the legislature does here. So
does the bill have like certain dates or milestones that it has to achieve?
Yes, it does.
Well, that's good. That's a plus.
Yeah.
Maybe some light at the end of the tunnel. Great, thank you.
So I don't see, Monica, I'm assuming you don't have any other questions. If so, you can put your hand down. Thank you. I have two questions for you, Melissa. First of all, thank you very much. I don't see anything here that I would say, yeah, no, let's not support that, especially this early in the process. I had a question as well about SB 612. This is this PCIA one that everybody's been asking about. But for my clarification, we're talking about legacy resources. When I think of that, I'm going, okay, natural gas, nuclear, large hydro, what else? What are the legacy resources that this would include if this bill were to pass?
It also includes all of the renewables contracts that the utility did. So,
Okay.
yeah, solar, wind, biomass.
Okay, good. And then the second one is SB 31, and SB 31 is the Cortese and This is requiring the CEC to identify and implement programs to promote existing and new building decarb. Is this specific to the use of expending federal funds for this? Because I think, as you know, there's a $50 million pilot that the CEC is participating in as the build side of it, which is the new construction, the res new construction. And then there's tech, which is the existing building that's 30 million that's happening right now. So is this like saying, no, don't use ratepayer dollars, use federal funding?
I don't recall precisely how the funding is broken out, but I think this one enables federal funding for the projects in addition to any state funding. I don't think it's exclusive of. This is not a bill that would take funding away from existing programs. I think the idea here is to continue to encourage future funding.
Yeah, no, I can definitely see that. It does say it's requiring CEC under EPIC to award funds for projects benefiting electric ratepayers and leading to development of building decarb technologies and investments. And I know that, I mean, that's ongoing. They have that already. So I'm trying to figure out how this moves it forward, and the use of other funds would be good. I mean, I think that, anyway, that was my question about that particular one.
Yeah, I'd have to look at the bill language a little more closely on that one to get back to you.
Okay, well, I don't know that you need to get back to me right now, but one of the things to think about is, as we look through that, is where are the funds coming from? I think it's a really big win if these can come from federal government funds. Not so big a win if they're going to take away from anything that's ongoing right now under energy efficiency, or put a new, cause a new fund to be placed on ratepayers for this, because there's already a lot going on in the state. So CAC members, this is an action item for us, but as I said at the very beginning, I do not feel that we have to take action on this unless, from everything I heard in the questions from the CAC members, I didn't hear a strong response to say, absolutely not, we should not support this one. I heard questions about some of them. And so I'm perfectly fine with passing on to the board on Wednesday that we had no strong stance on any of these, unless there's some other way that you prefer me to bring it to the board from the CAC.
I'm willing to make a motion to approve staff's proposed legislative platform.
I would want to, I guess I would rather see us incorporate some of the comments that were made, because you're right, there was a lot of like, okay, cool. I would like us to specifically voice support for the behind the meter resource adequacy stuff, and at least mention that there is concern around, but not yet opposition, right? Like not yet support, not yet opposition to the PCIA bill, but that it requires a bit more looking into to make sure that we're acting in the best interests of our customers.
So does that mean not a second to my motion?
I actually, Monica, I didn't hear all of it. It was a little fuzzy. Can you say?
Oh,
what
sorry. I said I would make, I move support of staff's recommendation on their legislative platform.
I would second that motion.
So
Would
we
you
have
be open to the comments that were made?
I'm not sure how to reflect the comments because I don't know if we have consensus on the comments. It seems like the one that is only really being a strong support is SB 612. Everything else is kind of like a tentative support or a watch. So I think it would be premature to recommend that staff support something, a strong support, at this current state. But if there's general comments that we could provide about the types of bills that we generally support, then maybe we could do that.
That makes sense to me. I would trust the chair to summarize the, the general feelings that were expressed and making it really clear that, we didn't take a vote on them, that there wasn't like widespread anything, but like these are the comments that are being made. She does that well.
Cynthia.
Yes, we only have one bill, as I look at this, that we are supporting at this point, in that Senate Bill 612. And the others, well, actually, yes, there are other bills, but regarding, there's only the one Senate bill. Well, at least that's what I'm looking at, I hope. I am not prepared to support Senate Bill 612 at this point. I would like to see how the bill, it was amended, I guess, on March 9th. But I'm not quite ready to support this bill. The other bills, for the most part, I do support, but Senate Bill 612, it has the yellow caution light for me.
Okay. Thank you, Cynthia. Adrian, we have a motion. We have a second. Do we have any further comment from the committee?
I just want to make sure I understand correctly, because I think I might be wrong. It happens a lot. So the motion would be to support staff stance, which is by and large watching things.
The motion is to support staff's legislation. Say that again, Anna Livy. It's to support the legislation on the platform as put forward by staff at this point. We had a that in a second, and I did hear you, and I will caveat that to the extent that we have this, concern, and then at this point, it's a vote on whether or not we support the legislative platform for the most part. Well, it's fully at this point. We lost Anna Olivia. All right. I don't want to take a vote on this until she's able to get back on the phone. So what I'd like to do is table this for right now and assume that she's going to come back, that her internet enables her to come back on the phone, and then we'll take a vote on this. So we're going to table this for right now and move on to the SMUD energy help, which is JP. Melissa, thank you very much. You don't need to stick around unless you want to, but you'll hear what I have to say in the Wednesday meeting. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, thanks very much, folks. So I will be joined tonight by Samantha Weaver, who has recently joined the programs team over from Melissa's team to help with our Connected Communities work. I see Anna Olivia is reconnecting. Do you want to finish that topic?
Yeah, Anna Olivia, if you're on again, we had tabled the vote on anything until you could come back. We assumed that your internet would come back, and so we haven't taken a vote on this. We're waiting for you. Are you feeling like your
Yes,
internet's in a better position?
Sorry, it just dropped. I think it's too early for us to take a support stance on bills that aren't finalized yet. I think we should just watch them. I don't know where we are with the voting.
We haven't voted yet. we have a motion to support staff in terms of the current EBC position. And that's the motion. I will say that when I say this, we can, if we want a friendly amendment to it, to support as it is now, but continue to watch them. Monica, are you okay with that as a friendly amendment?
That's fine.
Okay. So the motion is to support staff's current position, support position, as shown in the legislative platform on the recommended bill positions. These are not the watch, well, we're going to watch all of them, and then continue to watch these. So we have a friend amendment, second. Jane, are you okay with that friendly amendment? Can you say that so it's?
Yes,
Thank you.
I'm good with that.
All right, Adrian, can we have a roll call, please, on that?
Yes, excuse me, Member Eldridge,
No.
Member Laundrie,
No,
Member Pacheco, Member Padilla,
Yes.
Vice Chair Frank,
Yes,
Chair Sutter.
Yes,
Motion passes.
thank you. All right, JP, moving on to item C6.
All right. Thanks
JP,
very
you
much.
got a lot of slides, so go fast.
All right. We'll move through.
All right.
So this agenda item is an information item. We wanted to share with the Community Advisory Committee the actions that we have been taking for our vulnerable customers who have arrearages and are facing potential disconnection, though no one's being disconnected right now. We'll get into that. So we'll jump into the slides. Adrian, if we could go to the next slide, please. Thanks very much. So just wanted to alert folks to kind of what the status is today of disconnections. So just to confirm, EBCE does not disconnect customers. PG&E is the only entity that can disconnect customers. If customers don't pay us, then we can send them back to PG&E, and then PG&E can disconnect customers, and there is a set of rules about how they can do that. We have not been sending customers back to PG&E, and PG&E has not been disconnecting customers, and there's a ban until this summer, and there's certainly ongoing conversations around that ban and helping customers who have been unable to pay bills due to COVID. So we also have our arrearage management plan that we are going to be offering to help customers reduce debt, and we'll talk about that later. And then there are other activities that the PUC has initiated around providing relief with COVID. Next slide, please. So EBCE has also been doing our own activities around COVID and arrearage management. As I mentioned, we haven't been sending customers back to PG&E, and we put a non-payment policy in place last spring, sorry, that's in place until April of this year, and we're going to be asking for an extension for that. So we don't refer customers with unpaid debt to collections because that is can cause problems for people's credit and borrowing, which we don't want to do. And one thing we can also do is forgive debt. That doesn't impact PG&E's ability to disconnect a customer if they don't pay us and they don't pay PG&E. Even if we don't send them back to PG&E, PG&E can still disconnect them for unpaid PG&E debt. That's not in our control. But again, we haven't been sending customers back to PG&E, and PG&E has not been disconnecting customers. And one thing I would note as we are thinking about activities and funding that EBCE can provide for customers who are having troubles paying their bills is we did increase our uncollectibles budget by a factor of 4 for this year. And that was specifically related to COVID. And so our uncollectibles budget in FY20 was $2.4 million. And this year we increased it to 10 million, 9.9. And it actually looks like our uncollectible debt for this year is going to be more than that. So EBC is already spending quite a bit of money, on customers who are unable to pay their bills. So that's not a program to help customers specifically, but it is funding that is coming from EBCE customers to basically forgive that debt and again, not send those customers to any kind of collections. Next slide, please. So there's been some questions to the board for EBCE to evaluate SMUD's program, the Energy Help program. And that program has been operating for almost 17 years now. And it's a program that allows customers to pay a little bit extra on their bill to support people who are having trouble paying their bills. It's important to note that that is not a direct funding to customers who haven't paid their bills. That funding supports local nonprofits to support and provide assistance to low-income households in the area. There's an estimate on the SMUD website that about 37,000 households have been supported over these 17 years. But again, there's no direct bill payments to provide debt relief or arrearage relief. And so the table here shows some of the partners that SMUD has listed as having been supported through this effort. And I also wanted to mention that, in addition to the uncollectibles that we are planning to write off this year, in response to COVID, we also have provided over it's about $1.375 million in grants to local CBOs in response to COVID-19. So some of that funding, a lot of that funding actually came from local programs. We pulled it out and made that available to our CBOs with the express intent of assisting low-income customers and providing assistance to food banks and many other local CBOs. So we've actually done quite a bit that is very similar to the SMUD Energy Help program already this year. Next slide, please. So I also wanted to talk about our Connected Communities program, and we are very excited to have Samantha on board, who's going to be managing a lot of this, and she'll be talking a bit about some of the activities that we are going to be reaching out to the CAC for assistance with. But this program started a little over a year ago, and Sam was very integral to getting it set up. And as I think you all know, Febby has also been quite important and doing a lot of this work over the last year as we've been setting this up. And Febby will continue to work on the disconnections and connected communities work at a regulatory level. But we wanted to have a more dedicated person to work on this Connected Communities program. So me and Sam are going to tag team a little bit on this presentation tonight. But the focus of our Connected Communities program is to reduce arrearages and disconnections for EBCE customers. We started this prior to COVID-19 because we've got, we have always had some high disconnection rates in EBCE territory, and we wanted to have a program specifically around that challenge that some of our customers are facing. And we also really want to use data to drive decision-making around programs, and certainly programs to help customers who are challenged. It's important to make sure that the funding and the effort is having a benefit, and that people are actually reducing their arrearages and reducing disconnections. So we've done a bit of work there. We've spent a lot of time evaluating data on some of our programs, which we'll go into a little bit. And we also wanted to make sure that we talk to customers. So we've now completed, I think, 7 of our focus groups with customers who are experiencing arrearages or have experienced disconnections in the past, to understand what's going on in their lives and what's challenging in paying their utility bills and other bills as we're learning. And then we're also partnering with UC Berkeley, a team at UC Berkeley, to help analyze this data and analyze our interventions and actually design and test interventions that we can analyze, so that we can confirm that the programs and funding that we are putting in place are actually helping people pay bills, which is the important thing, and and reducing stress in their lives. And so how can we do that? We've got a few interventions that we're going to plan to do that can reduce customers' bills, and then we are also learning that there may be some things that we can do outside of actual discounts that can also help people pay their bills on time and not suffer from arrearages and some of the other things that occur. So that's our Connected Communities program in general, and we'll keep diving into some of these areas. So next slide, please. So one of the things that we've analyzed is our CARE FARA customers. So we did a pretty extensive analysis on CARE. And CARE is a 30% discount to bills. It reduces customers' bills by about $30 to $40 a month. And so we looked at, our accounts that are on CARE and our accounts that are not on CARE, and we compared them against each other for similar time periods, and looked at how much arrearage and disconnection was impacted. And the result of that was that the arrearages and disconnections for CARE customers was not significantly different, not very reduced. We did see that arrearages declined by about $3, and the CARE discount is $30 to $40 a month. And there was a de minimis reduction in disconnection. Now, that doesn't mean that CARE doesn't provide benefits. People may be paying other bills with the money that they're saving from CARE. That's something that we might be able to analyze with some of the data that our UC team has access to. So it's not to say that CARE doesn't have value, but when we look at it specifically with respect to reducing arrearage, there's not a big correlation there. So that's something to think about, to understand, and look a little bit more into. Next slide, please. Now, that said, we have continued to do outreach for CARE and FARA. They both provide a good discount for our customers. And so we did get some outreach partners and provided $10,000 grants to both of them, Spectrum as well as Interfaith Power and Light, to try to get people enrolled in CARE. This was kicked off kind of right at the beginning of COVID, so face-to-face interactions were tough. We did get some enrollments in CARE. We did not hit 500, the target of 500. It slowed down considerably when COVID hit, and we were doing a lot of outreach to folks who were already enrolled in CARE. So it's something that we have continued to work on, and certainly support, especially since CARE is funded through non-bypassable charges and not specifically funded by EBCE. So if it's a benefit that can help our customers, we're all for it. The other issue is it's actually really hard for us to track which folks we talk to who actually enroll in CARE, because they have to go to PG&E to enroll in CARE. So the tracking is quite difficult. We spent quite a bit of time trying to get a good linkage there, but it's hard to measure a program if you can't measure the actual people that you encourage to get into that program. But we did continue that. Next slide, please. And then we've also used our data to start building a disconnection propensity model, which is essentially a way to use payment data, census tract data, data that we might have at the household level, to try to figure out which customers are most at risk of not paying their bill and then being disconnected. And so we built that. The first iteration was, yielded some interesting results, and we've started to use that propensity model to try to identify customers who we think might be eligible for care, try to get them into care. And we've used that as a way to try to increase care enrollments. We tested that with SMUD. It was mixed results and actually pretty expensive. Each call was about $4.50. So scaling that program is a challenge. And now we are spending some more time. Our data and analytics team is continuing to develop that propensity model. And the goal is to try to get to a place where each month we can look at our customers and try to identify folks who might not be able to pay their bills and get disconnected, and then do proactive outreach to those customers to try to help them figure out, how to help them pay their bill. And so there's a few other layers of data that we are layering in to try to teach the model and get it to work more accurately, so that we're not calling a huge number of customers to hit a needle in a haystack. So that's one of the things that we are continuing to refine. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, we have been doing some focus groups. Our plan is to conduct 9 focus groups in multiple languages. We've done a good number of them and have some preliminary results. And the value of actually talking to customers who are challenged and have been disconnected, I've experienced that, that disruption and the stress of not being able to pay all their bills is, it's quite eye-opening. It's hard sometimes to listen to. I'm sure it's really hard to live through, but it's just so amazing to get this real life feedback from folks who who are living in our county and really having a hard time paying their bills, not just their utility bills, but all their bills. And so we're now extracting some of the lessons from this and trying to figure out how we can put some interventions in place that can really meet the challenges that our customers are telling us about. And as well as when we're talking with them, we kind of talk about, there's about a first hour of the focus group, which is what are the challenges that they're facing. And then the second hour of the focus group is what are some of the things that we can do as far as either interventions or some of our programs like our low income energy efficiency program or other programs that might help them reduce their bills or pay them on time. And so we're continuing to get information from these focus groups and think about how we can put that into an effective program. Next slide, please. So now I'm going to turn it over to Samantha. One of our great opportunities is our disadvantaged green tariff and community solar green tariff programs to provide discounts to customers. And this is another thing that we're going to be testing to see how well this helps our customers who are challenged paying their bills to pay their bills. And yeah, go for it, Sam.
Thanks, JP. Can you all hear me okay? All right. Well, it's nice to be here and to see some familiar faces. Just quickly by way of introduction, as JP mentioned, I was previously on EBCE's public policy team and was part of sort of the initial design and conception of the Connected Communities pilot prior to going off on parental leave. I'm back now and I'm looking forward to working on this in a different capacity and kind of seeing it through to the implementation phase. So what I'm going to do here is provide kind of a deeper dive that I think we've provided in the past into, as JP said, the CPUC disadvantaged communities and community solar green tariff program. So for the next, 4 or 5 slides, I'll give a quick introduction to the program. I'll talk you through the sort of current status and the timeline. And then I hope to focus the bulk of the time on opportunities for community sponsorship of the community solar program. So to quickly kind of summarize these for folks who haven't thought about these in a while. There are two community solar programs here. Both of them allow CARE and FARA eligible customers who live in disadvantaged communities to receive 100% solar energy at a 20% discount. So this program was conceived by the CPUC as sort of a solar for all program. To participate, you don't need to own a home. You don't need to have a roof that can support solar. You need to be CARE or FARA eligible and live in a DAC. The key difference between the two programs, or one of the key differences that, again, I want to highlight, is that the community solar program requires a community sponsor. And I'll go into more detail on that topic in a second here. Next slide, please. So just in terms of where things stand in the timeline, I mentioned we're providing a deeper dive here than usual, and that's really because this program is really just now getting into the implementation stage. It's previously been in, what I would call the regulatory and policy phase. So what you're seeing here is a timeline for both programs. The items in gray are related to CPUC approvals that we need in order to administer the program. The items in blue are procurement related. So, where EBCE would sign a PPA with a solar project here. And then items in green are related to the community sponsorship component I mentioned. So we're here today in March. Where things stand now and where we're focused on is development of procurement materials on the one hand, and development of a community engagement program on the other. What we're waiting for is in April, we expect to receive finally CPUC approval to go forward and administer these programs. There are a couple additional regulatory hurdles we'll need to meet. We need to receive approval of our procurement materials, for example, and that's before we can begin our solicitation process for the projects. The idea is ideally we'll be able to select those projects in the fall, and ultimately customers will receive energy from those projects starting in early 2022. So again, this is a preliminary timeline as it's underlined on the slide. Things will shift depending on approval status and items like that. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned at the beginning, the topic I really wanted to highlight tonight is the need for a community sponsor of the community solar program. So as a quick overview, community sponsors need to be nonprofits, local governments, or schools that are located in a disadvantaged community that's also within 5 miles of the project. The benefits to being a sponsor are the 20% bill discount, so the same discount that subscribers to the project would receive. Sponsors can receive up to 25% of the solar project's output. That means they can cover their 100% of their energy usage, but they can't have more than 25% of the project. And then last but not least, and maybe most importantly, sponsors can receive funding for marketing, education, and outreach. And that's really important because the key role of the sponsor is to help project developers and the community come together. So the sponsor is helping identify community suggested project sites. They're conducting outreach and helping to create interest in subscribing to the project. They're required to provide a letter of commitment, and I'll get into more specifics on what that is in a second. But last but not least, it's important to point out that projects can have more than one sponsor. So, the more the merrier. Next slide, please. So I wanted to also just provide some information on the commitment letter because this is the one CPUC requirement of community sponsors, and that they submit this letter. And the letter has to include a demonstration of interest from community members, an estimated number of subscribers, a preliminary outreach plan, and information on siting preferences, community suggested sites, etc. And the way this is envisioned to work is that the sponsor provides that letter to the project developer. And when the developer bids into EBCE's solicitation or RFO, the developer includes that letter as part of their package. Next slide, please. So there's a couple next steps I also wanted to highlight tonight. I think I mentioned earlier on when I showed the timeline that a key component early on for us is development of an engagement plan around this community sponsorship concept. You know, we envision that engagement plan to include things like engagement principles based on best practices developed by environmental justice organizations. So examples of these things are, you know, concepts like meet people where they are, make sure that the ask is clear, make sure that the process and the decision-making is transparent. The plan should also include, you know, specific strategies for how we'll identify project sponsors. I've included some examples of these here. These are really just examples. I think it's important to point out that the way I see EBCE's role here as sort of facilitator and convener of the relationship between community sponsors and developers. So, you know, sponsors are intended to facilitate a relationship between the community and the project developer. EBCE is there to help make that happen. So that means we should be hosting information sessions. Unfortunately, we have to be doing that virtually given the current COVID situation. It means we should certainly be updating our website to include information that might help. You know, one example is if a community organization lets us know that they're interested in potentially sponsoring, we can put their information on our website so that developers can find it and know who to contact. We can host matchmaking events, again, playing that facilitator, convener role, helping develop informal meet and greet events. So to conclude here, I wanted to just flag for folks on the CAC that, you know, we'll be seeking feedback on this engagement plan, and, you know, it'll cover this process for identifying project sponsors going forward. I think that's the end. So I'll turn it back to JP.
Cool, thanks, Sam. Next slide, please. So we also have our arrearage management plan. And so, you know, DAC-GT and CSGT, those are going to be interventions we will be offering to our customers. And the arrearage management plan is another program. We've had multiple conversations about this. It's a program that our customers are starting to enroll in that can forgive up to $8,000 in debt on total PG&E debt per account. And when customers are paying their bills, as long as they're paying their bill, they're getting, over the course of 12 months, they get 1/12 of their debt forgiven for each month that they pay their bill. So we're also looking at ways that we can do DAC-GT and AMP for customers to really help them, you know, reduce their bills. Because if they get an additional 20% discount on care, hopefully that makes it easier for them to pay their bills, and then they can get more of their debt forgiven. So we've got over 300 EBCE customers already enrolled, and we have about 14,000 of our customer accounts that are eligible. And so we're working on developing an outreach and enrollment plan now, and we certainly are going to be evaluating the impacts of this program as well. Next slide. So one other thing we are doing is offering solar to DAC/SASH eligible customers who have been facing disconnection, and we have kind of limited funding on that. It's not tremendously scalable, but we did want to offer solar to some of our homeowners who have experienced high arrearages. So we're working with Grid Alternatives, our selected vendor, on that program as well. Next slide, last slide. So just wanted to, you know, bring, actually go ahead and this is, so we are also looking at other options for helping customers that are not discount related. Last slide, Adrian. So we wanted to let the CAC and the board know about our activities supporting CBOs and providing debt relief, as well as our Connected Communities program. You know, we have looked at the SMUD Energy Help program. Don't think that has been effective, and we've actually done a lot of the things that SMUD Energy Help has already done with our COVID relief. Our Connected Communities program is a multi-pronged strategy towards helping our customers who are facing challenges and evaluating the results so that we can better hone programs for these customers as we continue to provide service. And that's all we have for tonight. Happy to take questions.
Great. Thank you, JP and Samantha. I'm going to open it up to the public first and then come back to the CAC. Adrian, do we have any public comments on this?
There are no public comments. Oh, actually, Jessica Tovar just raised her hand. I can allow her to speak.
The other thing, Adrian, can you please move Anna Olivia, who's an attendee, over to the panelists? She's the phone number 503-358. You see her?
Yep.
Thank you. And go ahead, Jessica, if he hasn't unmuted you yet.
Okay. I think I'm on now.
Yep.
East Bay Clean Power Alliance. Thank you very much for that presentation. I appreciate, all you've done thus far to help people with assistance with bills. That is a huge ongoing problem and an even bigger problem in the context of COVID-19. One thing I just really want to emphasize is I believe that number, or the statistic, was that only 30% of households who are eligible for care are enrolled, meaning there's a huge amount of residents, households that are eligible for care but aren't enrolled. Maybe they don't know about the resources. So there definitely needs a lot more investment and work in the community to get people enrolled in these programs. And then therefore they'd be eligible to be included in the AMP debt relief. So I think that's really important. We have a lot of ideas that we've shared before, I guess, at some of the previous meetings. And I did hear about Peninsula Clean Energies started, I guess, like a month ago for giving about $100, I think, per customer for customers who were in debt, so that they can have some relief in this time right now where people are probably going back a year now. So that is something that is incredibly important at this time. And just really realizing that, once the moratorium lifts, disconnections would follow because you lose. And just to be clear, it isn't community choice programs that disconnect these customers. They get sent back to PG&E. PG&E does the disconnection. We need to show that community choice is the better option and doesn't treat people who are struggling in this way. And so I think this is a great start. And I want to emphasize something I did bring up also last week, is that what we need on the East Bay Community Energy website is an explicit, are you behind on your bills? Sign up for care now. It's hard to find the care website on the East Bay Community Energy website, your webpage. And also information for LIHEAP should be there as well, because that provides like a one-time payment for somebody who's severely behind. There is another program I've heard of recently I don't know much about, but I like to research it. I think the acronym is PIPP, and I don't know what that stands for, but all these resources should be readily available in the different languages on your website. And as we move closer, we definitely need a formal program moving forward, as disconnections is a constant problem despite the situation, the pandemic that we're in now. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jessica. So I'm going to open it up because I don't see any other hands raised. And Adrian, I'm assuming we don't have anybody else.
No more public speakers.
Great, thank you. Cynthia, your hand is up.
Yes, a couple of things. First of all, kudos to writing off the debt of our current arrearage clients. That's what I believe you said earlier. In this COVID period, a lot of folks are being affected, and we do not want to generally, penalize anyone's credit, especially during COVID, which would have an impact on folks. And I do, what Jessica just said, I do fully support. I think we should make it easier on the website. We should have links to these various programs, CARE, FARA, LEAP, so that folks can enroll in those programs, and or a family member or perhaps an organization can help them enroll in those discounted programs. One of the things in your PowerPoint that I did want to point out, under the AMP Arrearage Management Plan, I do have a concern. If a customer misses 2 consecutive monthly payments, they will be removed from program for 1 year. I wish there was an alternative to that. I don't know what the alternative would be, but if somebody was short of money 1 month, they may be short of money the next month. So I don't know if there could be an hardship assessment or some type of assessment before they are removed from the program. Maybe they had a family emergency. And I wouldn't want them precluded for up to a year, because perhaps their circumstances could improve in 3 months. I know that's a lot to ask, but I'd like to, everything about what you presented tonight, I thought was very, very, very good. But I'd like to see some work on if a customer misses 2 consecutive monthly payments. If we could somehow, maybe 2 payments in 6 months, I don't know, see if there's possibly an alternative proposal for that. And the last thing I'd like to ask you is, I think you said there 311 customers enrolled, and I'm just curious, do you know how many have defaulted in this program, please?
So thank you, Cynthia. I'm going to ask JP to clarify 2 things for me, and then maybe if you know anybody I don't know how long they've been in this program, but one, I think, Cynthia, you indicated that EBCE has forgiven debt at this point, and I didn't hear anything that says that EBCE has forgiven any debt. There are multiple ways that EBCE is moving to help people, but there has been no debt forgiveness that I'm aware of.
Well, maybe I'm saying it wrong. He said that he wrote off debt this year. That's what I thought. Maybe I heard it.
What I mentioned is that in our budget, we have increased our uncollectibles from 2.5 million in last fiscal year to 10 million this year. So this is us budgeting for uncollectible revenues, which is basically people not paying their bills. So that's not writing off debt, and it's not writing off so it's not writing it off. I'm just mentioning that, we've put more money into our uncollectibles budget with the expectation that this year is going to be a hard year for a lot of customers. And then there's 311 customers who have so far enrolled in the arrearage management plan. That's data from PG&E. We have not been marketing that program yet, though we will start soon. Right now, the enrollment process is manual. So there's not a lot of outreach going on for it because it's quite laborious to get customers in that program. To our knowledge, we get a weekly report. None of those customers have defaulted out of that program yet. Again, it's only a couple weeks worth of data. And just one last point for you, Cynthia, the requirements on this program are PUC mandated. Those are not EBCE rules around making payments missing 2 payments and not being eligible for the program. The program is a PUC decision. We can either access the program and offer it to our customers as is, or we cannot, but there's no opportunity. We tried to influence the program when it was, before it had been completely finalized, but now it's finalized and we either get to offer it or we don't.
Okay, thank you for the clarification. That's very important. And I do think it's better to offer it than not. Thank you.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, thank you, Cynthia. Any other members before we move on to our next item?
I would like to, I don't know how to raise my hand on my phone, but I would like to.
Sure, go ahead, Anna Olivia.
Okay, thank you so much to all of you. That was awesome. I wanted to first off compliment Dan. A couple weeks ago, I reached out to EBCE, but just through the regular, like I'm a customer sending a message, because a friend of mine was extremely behind on her electric and water bills and was panicking, trying to figure out how to keep the lights on for her kids. And so I sent EBCE a message, and Dan personally responded at 8 o'clock at night on a Saturday, and I was so impressed, and I really just want to acknowledge the personal level of attention that our customers do receive when they reach out. I had no idea that it would actually be ABC internal staff as opposed to like a call center staff, and so just really wanted to give props. JP, I had a question for you regarding the programs which you actually just touched on with that CPUC program. Many of the resources that I was sent were actually CPUC programs, not EBCE programs. They're programs that we're offering but didn't initiate. And so I'm wondering if there are any EBCE initiated projects that we're offering, or if we're utilizing other people's resources exclusively. And then I couldn't raise my hand on the community outreach piece because I was an attendee. And I just wanted to say that's really exciting. I'm really pleased to hear what's happening. And if there is anything in electronic format, there's a lot of tenant advocacy groups and housing advocacy groups that are specifically working with folks who are struggling to pay bills, are in danger of losing their homes, all that kind of stuff. And they get a lot of contacts every day from people reaching out to help. So if we could get them information on these programs specifically, they might be able to do quite a lot of that outreach for us. And I would be happy to put together a list for outreach or help with dissemination of information. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Anna Olivia. Jane or Monica, any comments before
Can JP answer the question I asked?
Oh, I'm sorry. I apologize. Yes.
Yeah. So Anna Olivia, we're certainly leveraging the programs that are being made available. And as I mentioned, we've been funding these focus groups, and we are extracting the learnings from the focus groups to put together our programs. So that's something that we're certainly looking at, but we wanted to actually talk with our customers in a moderated way to then pull together, what we would be doing and funding.
Awesome. Thank you so much. It really is very exciting.
Monica?
So I don't have a have very many questions. Just first of all, thank you, Samantha and JP. Excellent summary. I guess just maybe along the same lines as Jessica Tovar, I would just hope that there's many vehicles or avenues that you can use to get to those parts of the community that maybe aren't as engaged as other customers, whether they don't speak the language, don't have access to internet, aren't even aware that EBCE is their provider. If there's a way to expand your outreach, maybe working through existing channels, maybe Jessica, I think she mentioned one at least, but working to see if there's ways to get more information out and to get it out where it needs to be. Maybe it's through the churches or places where people tend to congregate or go, although right now that would be a hard place to, we don't know where anybody goes. But anyway, they're not virtual, they're not online. So I'm just worried if we're not being able to get to the right people with the right messages. But otherwise, thank you so much for the summary.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Monica. Jane, did you have any thoughts?
No, I just echo the thanks from the rest of the CAC on this excellent presentation and just the efforts underway at EBCE to support the community and particularly those most in need. I think I'm looking forward to hearing more about the community sponsorship program and what we can do to support your efforts there to get the word out. So yeah, looking forward to that and how we can be more actively, I think, supporting these efforts and liaising with the community, particularly in regard to that project.
Thank you.
Thank you. The one thing I'll say and to the CAC and members of the public is to kind of harken back and look at the slides on the slide isn't numbered, so I don't know which one it was. It was the preliminary project timeline for the DAC program and the community solar program. There is a potential timeline associated with that. And if you know of anybody who may want to be a sponsor, I think, and Samantha, correct me if I'm wrong, these people would need to kind of start figuring that out and then do some sort of solicitation during June and July, right? So
So the sponsor, the one requirement on the sponsor is they need to submit a letter. And they do need to, that letter needs to include an outreach plan, for example. So yes, there's definitely some upfront thinking that needs to occur. And you're correct that may need to happen in the next, over the summer. I think maybe that's the short answer.
But often these can take a while for people to kind of get the word out, think about it, talk about it, determine, and then get something moving. So my only point is I would suggest that if you know of people who may be good folks to be a project sponsor or who may be interested in this, is please let them know about this. And if they wanted to learn more information about becoming a project sponsor, is there a way for them to do that now? Or is that going to be something that you're going to present later?
That's going to be something we're developing right now and we'll be presenting, I would hope next month, provided there's time on the agenda.
Great. So I just wanted to make sure that people were aware of that and get the word out.
Yeah, thanks for the call. But yes, the timeline is important. The good news is we have flexibility to stagger our procurement solicitation so that it accommodates the need for the upfront outreach.
Okay, thank you so much. All right, seeing no more hands, I'm going to move us on. We might end up going a little bit later today. We have 2 more items, but the next item is the Aramis project update. I'm thinking this is going to be a short update, but Howard is going to talk to us about this. This was brought back to us. Cynthia, I think you requested this and it finally was given the okay by the Alameda County Board of Supervisors for this project to move forward. I did see that there's going to be legislative suing back and forth. So there's nothing in my, I'm not quite sure this is really going to go in place quite yet, but we did, you did request and we're bringing back so the CAC can be aware of this project and what it was. Howard.
Thank you, Mary.
Yep.
Yeah, thanks, Mary. So, this presentation, as you can see, is really the presentation that we provided in the November regular board meeting for action, which was approving the storage, the solar plus storage RA contract. And so I'm just representing that. I don't have any substantive new information to provide other than, Mary, what you had just shared. So the project was, at that stage, it was approved. I may be getting the exact committee wrong, but I believe it was the zoning board. And then it was appealed, which was expected, as it did face quite a bit of community opposition. And then about a week or 2 weeks ago, it was approved by the Board of Supervisors. It was a bit of a marathon session, about a 10-hour meeting just on Aramis, just to give you a sense, and had quite a bit of support, but also faced quite a bit of opposition. And so at this stage, I think from a county perspective, it is approved. The project can move forward. But as you noted, Mary, I think you said it was legislative. I don't expect any legislative action. Litigation is what is what some of the opposition had voiced in the meetings, and we'll see if that happens or not. Obviously, I'm not in a position to really know what direction that's going to go in, but that was certainly noted by members. Anyways, that is the most substantive update. This project, I'll run through some of these slides fairly quickly, but since it was already covered before, I won't cover every slide in full detail and really open up more for questions to see what folks from the CAC want to discuss. The name of the project is Aramis. It is in Livermore. The entire project is a 100-megawatt solar plus a 100-megawatt battery with a 4-hour duration project. It's at the intersection of North Livermore Avenue and Manning Road. Oh, sorry, Adrian, if you could actually scroll to the first slide, and then toggle one more. Oh, this is for some reason half of the
graphics not showing up.
Yeah, that's weird. The item posted online has everything, so I'm not sure why the
This is the PowerPoint rather than the.
Yeah, why don't you pull the PDF?
I'll go ahead and get.
Yeah, that's strange why it came out that way. But at least what's posted online is the correct item for folks. So while Adrian pulls that up, let me just speak to it at a high level. Again, 100-megawatt project. It's at the intersection of North Livermore Avenue and Manning Road. And what EBCE has at this stage contracted for is a 10-year local resource adequacy contract. And it is an average volume of about 20 megawatts of local Greater Bay Area resource adequacy, but the volumes fluctuate a little bit because of this being a solar project and having kind of different generation volumes month to month. It kind of ranges between 14 megawatts and 23 megawatts, but averaging around 20 megawatts over the life of the contract. The project is expected to begin construction in 2023, and the contract itself is for April 2024 through December 2033. So 10-year period. It is still a few years out, obviously, in beginning construction and delivering, and so that's why there's not a whole lot of meaningful update other than, of course, the Board of Supervisors approval. So it is still very much so in the sort of design, procurement, financing phase. So not a whole lot that an off-taker would be sort of actively engaged on during this time frame. There we go. Great. Perfect. When you stay on this page, at a high level, this project will create about 400 living wage, all union jobs, offset about 188,000 metric tons of CO2, powers about 25,000 homes. Next slide. I think this is one of the areas I think was inquired about, which is what is the labor exactly. So the project has already signed a project labor agreement with 5 local construction crafts. That was done in February of 2018. That is, I'll note, a bit unusual for a project this early, and I think that was done explicitly to address specific concerns in Alameda County. Wanting to pursue, of course, the discretionary permits, which were just approved. The developer, had communicated from the very beginning. They understood this to be a critical priority for, the county, for our agency. Nothing was going to get approved without these specific types of PLAs being in place. So they did secure those, which is great. But it is an estimated 400 local construction jobs. They will endeavor to try to hire as much of that locally as possible. I know we've had the question before, well, how do we ensure that? And the reality is it's difficult to contractually say you have to do that. You know, they have to pull the labor from available areas, both in Alameda County and potentially, in San Joaquin County, City of Tracy area. And so, they do need to ensure that the labor is there. This is quite a number of construction jobs that are necessary at the peak of the facility installation. So, that is sort of Intersect's commitment to try to go and do that on a best efforts basis. But, you have to see, of course, what is available at the time. And then you can see some other statistics just in terms of local sales tax revenue, local procurement goals, and then some calculations that they have done in terms of local economic benefits at 22.5 million. Next slide, Adrian. Here are some details in terms of some of the community benefits. They have partnered with quite a number of local organizations and have committed to donating certain funds to organizations such as Tipping Point, among some of the others that are listed there. Excuse me. And the next slide, Adrian. This just kind of shows you, location. The picture to the bottom right is just a high level map view of kind of where the project is based, and then the one to the left of that gives a little bit of a more zoomed in lens on the specifics of where it is in Livermore. We've showed some of the support letters here. I think that was more relevant when we previously brought this forward as an action item, just to sort of show the level of support. And at this stage, I think people are aware of the various organizations which go far beyond this list, of course, supporting the project. And given it's now had received formal board support, you can obviously understand that the county has further supported the project as well. And the last slide. So just to sum up, I think as this committee certainly knows, EBCE has signed over 650 megawatts of new renewable generation, includes over 100 megawatts of projects located within Alameda County. This would be one of the largest solar projects in Northern California and certainly in Alameda County. I think one of the reasons why we really focus on resource adequacy is that there are very significant capacity constraints that the CPUC and CAISO are forecasting in the coming years. So as a general procurement priority, we've been very focused on resource adequacy, not just in Alameda County, but certainly throughout. And at this stage, again, this last couple bullets being a little bit outdated, but at this stage we did get support from the board on the transaction, on the contract, and the board of supervisors has also formally approved the project following its appeal. And that is it. Although last slide you can flip to that. That's just a sort of an area of solar project that the Intersect has developed. But that's not necessarily the one here. So just to be clear.
Thank you, Howard. I'm going to move to the public first, and then I'll come back to the CAC. I do see one hand, Adrian.
Yes,
Alita, and then it looks like Sue.
And Sue. Alita Dupree, I'm unmuting her right now. Hold on one second. Alita, you are unmuted.
Thank you, Chair Mary Sutter and members. Alita Dupree for the record. My pronouns are she and her. It's good to be back with you. This is a very important project that I've always supported from the start. And I speak to you anecdotally. I would be willing to live next to a solar power station. I would be willing to have solar panels on my roof if I could, but I can't because I rent. I know what it's like to breathe bad air. And this project and other projects like it can reduce the bad air in the neighborhood. I remember a number of years ago, I went to a Native American community and attended and spoke at a public meeting with the goal of closing down a coal-fired power plant. And about 5 years after that meeting, that power plant finished its phased closure and it is no longer operating. So this is our chance to add to our portfolio of clean energy, which will only benefit the EBCE district and beyond, as pollution travels across state lines. I ask for your strong advocacy in helping to keep this project on track, because to me, it is a no-brainer, because I would rather look at a field of solar panels than look at a coal pile or a bunch of oil wells. This eventually, I foresee, will reduce the cost of electricity over time, because we have seen that renewable electricity is going down in price over time. And 20 megawatts is substantial, because it takes a lot of small parts of our portfolio. To give an idea of what 20 megawatts can do, through a cursory examination, that's about the electricity that it would take to power a day's worth of trains in Grand Central Terminal, the world's largest railroad station located in New York City. I'm sure you've all seen it. Pre-COVID, 700 trains a day. So it's a great way to move trains. It's a great way to help people to power their homes. I live in an all-electric home, and I even just had my electric stove worked on and improved today so I could make some really good food. I ask for your continued advocacy and support of this project so it can be built and turned on, so people like myself can have more clean air. Thank you.
Thank you, Alita.
I am unmuting Sue Springer now.
Hi, I'm Sue Springer. I'm from Livermore, and I just wanted to express how disappointed I am with the EBCE. Can you hear me?
Yes.
The support of the Aramis solar project was very short-sighted. Alameda County needs a solar policy. There are a lot of places this project could have been placed, and yet you're taking a precious agricultural land on a scenic corridor to put a solar plant, an industrial sized solar plant that will just decimate the area. I hope that you think about this and who you support in the future. And I'm sure you're going to lose a lot of public support for what you're doing to Livermore. Thank you.
Thank you, Sue. Do we have any other public comments, Adrian?
There are no further public comments.
Okay, Cynthia, I think I saw your hand up at the beginning. Is this an item that you wanted to talk to?
Yes, I had a question. And first of all, I do say that I do support the PLA agreements, 400 construction jobs, and there are community benefits. So there are some, there is merit, great merit to this project. Less environmental concerns. I'm going to call it environmental concerns that some of the members of the Livermore community have expressed. But my question is about the allocation that EBCE is getting. I don't, could we're getting 20 megawatts, if I'm saying that correctly, out of 100, I guess with the other 80 going to San Francisco. And I wonder in future contracts or can that be increased? Because it is residing in Alameda County. I do support solar projects. So I'm just curious about the amount that EBCE is getting and whether that can be adjusted in future contracts, knowing this, of course, is a 10-year contract. Thank you.
You want me to respond to that?
Yeah, I'm not sure, you know, as Cynthia said, it is 10 years. I'm not sure how these things work.
Yeah, so our contract is specifically for 10 years. I don't know what the length of Clean Power SFs is, and I don't know what's been made public, to be honest. But I would speculate to say that it is probably no shorter than 10 years and probably is longer than 10 years. But again, I'm speaking speculatively. I don't actually know the duration of their contract. So that, you know, the term of their contract could potentially put limitations on, you know, on whether we could do it at the 10-year mark when this contract is up. But certainly at some stage, the, you know, contract will be will sort of expire, and there'll be, you know, sort of more of an open platform to kind of negotiate for more output from the project or whatnot. So the quick answer is yes, at some stage that is a dialogue that we can certainly have, but there may be some contractual limitations here in the near term versus, you know, further out.
I guess really what I'm asking is, was it a possibility that we could have negotiated more for that, you know, for a larger, you know, a larger allocation, or is that something that came with the project? I'm just.
I don't want to go into sensitive, sort of exactly how negotiations went exactly, but you know, suffice it to say that, you know, there was an active dialogue with us. There's quite a bit that we need to consider in terms of how much we procure from Alameda County and where the locations are, so that we don't put too much concentration within our energy portfolio for one specific location. And we do have a wind project that is fairly close by in Livermore. So, you know, there are a number of factors that went into that, you know, economics, project location, different technology types, et cetera. So, you know, so they're, you know, those are maybe things that I'll sort of speak to in part of our decision-making process, but certainly we did have a dialogue with them about, you know, different volumes.
Okay, that I think that
Thank you.
answers it. Thank you.
Okay. Monica?
So I actually had to read this one a couple of times, Howard, because it reads as though it's a clean energy contract, but you're just getting the resource adequacy attributes. You're not actually getting any renewable energy from the project. Is that correct?
We're buying resource adequacy. Yeah, I don't know where you're reading it that it may read otherwise.
Maybe it's just because I ascribe usually the benefits, the environmental benefits to a renewable contract. So I'm curious, is that by choice that EBCE decided not to get the renewable resource credits from this contract? Was RA the only thing that you were interested in procuring?
We specifically sought resource adequacy on this contract, given some of the different factors I just spoke to.
And so is San Francisco the off-taker for all of the renewable resource?
I can't speak to all of exactly what San Francisco's contract is, unfortunately. I don't know what's public there, and I have limited information myself as well.
So since East Bay is only procuring the resource adequacy, then East Bay is not the main off-taker on this project, obviously. You're
Correct.
Just buying an attribute, which is interesting because I had seen the articles or the press release and the information, and it looked as though EBCE was like the main off-taker or the sponsor of this. So I guess I was confused. But I guess I generally support that. It seems like a good project, one that's going to get built. And I like the idea of diversifying location of where you buy resource adequacy from. And the idea of also buying resource adequacy from clean resources is a goal that I support as well. You know, it's unfortunate that we have to put resources in nice areas sometimes. But I think that if you want to build in a local area like Alameda or somewhere close to the Bay Area, because reliability is important to the Bay Area, you're going to have to come in closer and closer and further away from the Central Valley. And that's just the reality of how electricity works, and reliability is going to have to be met in the future. And I guess if I had a choice between this and a natural gas plant, I too would prefer to put this in the Bay Area versus a natural gas plant. So I support it. I don't know if there's an action item, but.
This is an informational item only. This was
Okay.
actually brought forward to us back in November, and it's just being, again.
Thank you.
So any other CAC members, or should we move on?
I would like to ask a quick question.
Sure.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. I also would like to thank both speakers. I know that this issue has been a passionate one, and one really strongly felt by our communities. If the board has already supported it, then the board has already supported it. My question is actually in the ways that we can address some of the concerns that have been brought up. My understanding is that the majority of the concerns are environmental, and the actual location, not the existence of the project, but the actual location where it is being placed. Do you know if there is being any effort or thought that is going into using the land as a carbon sink? They often grow crops underneath the solar panels that can serve as a way to remove carbon from our atmosphere, or if there are going to be any of the other environmentally beneficial dual uses that are becoming more common in industrial scale solar facilities.
Yeah, there's I'm certainly not the expert on this. There's quite a bit of information that's included in the overall permitting process that was submitted with the project, and quite a number of sort of conditions that are required of the developer as part of getting the conditional use permit. So the short answer is yes, there's a lot of different factors that are accounted for there and required there. And I can't speak to every detail, of course. But what I can say that was sort of discussed in the various meetings was there's different planting requirements, some to provide screening benefits, some of it to, I think there was some discussion of agricultural plantings, and I believe, I'm just going off of memory from the discussion itself, that I believe they ended up not requiring specific agriculture, or maybe that was something that we're going to continue to revisit. But just suffice it to say that certainly there was a pretty active dialogue with the Board of Supervisors and the review committee on what kinds of planting exactly were required. I know they're also, I believe they're doing sheep grazing, and they're doing beekeeping or beehives, so basically some forms of pollinator habitat. So there are a number of factors they're trying to do to address some of those concerns.
Thank you.
Howard. Thank you, Anna Olivia. Anything else, or I'm going to move us on to our last item. Okay, so our last item is also an informational item about supplier diversity, and this is so the CAC knows kind of what's happening on this front. Vanessa, I think you're presenting.
Yes, just checking y'all can hear me.
Yes.
Okay, great. Yeah, so this is an informational we'll be bringing to the board as well, informational on Wednesday. So just wanted to provide an overview, as this is the first year that EBCE and all CCAs were required to submit supplier diversity reports to the CPUC. It was due on March 1st. So just want to provide the context overview of the general order that outlines the program, as well as what we submitted, and flagging a bit of a challenge, and how we're working with that challenge in the context of supplier diversity. Hopefully, I know it's late. Hopefully, we won't take the full 25 minutes, but definitely want to make sure there's time for questions if there are any. We can go to the next slide, please, Adrian. Great, thank you. So a little context, history. It is a General Order 156 or GO 156 is a CPUC compliance requirement. It was first adopted in 1988 with the intent that still is effectively the same today, which is increasing procurement by utilities from diverse suppliers. And when utilities, that's all utilities regulated by the CPUC, so also water, telecom, and of course, electric utilities. With revenues over $25 million. That has only I think that's only changed in the 2019 updates, which I'll get to in a moment. But so for a number of decades here, it's been this program to increase procurements from diverse suppliers. And when the CPUC GO 156 references diverse suppliers, that's referencing to women-owned, minority-owned, disabled, veteran-owned, and or LGBT-owned business entities, or the acronym WMDV LGBTBEs, which you will see if you do dig into the reports. That's what that stands for. And so it's diverse suppliers that are both eligible and certified through the Supplier Clearinghouse, which is a state-run clearinghouse for all of the certified suppliers. Certification is relatively simple. It is free. And it just adds their name to this directory of certified suppliers so that private companies who can and choose to make decisions based off of that in terms of the businesses they support have a place to go and look and support that. And so the requirement of GO 156 is kind of two parts. It's a backward-looking annual report regarding the procurement from certified diverse suppliers, as well as a forward-looking plan for the year to come to continue to achieve the program's purpose and expand on it. In terms of how the CCAs got involved in the reporting requirement, in 2019, SB 255 passed, which expands GO 156 to a number of other agencies and entities regulated by the PUC. And that explicitly included CCAs with annual revenues over 15 million, which is all of the CCAs. And so, the purpose is in essence the same, but I do just want to mention that SB 255 also specifically calls out small and local businesses that are specifically targeted for procurement as well. And this is important to note because on the following slide, we'll discuss some of the challenges that EBCE and the CCAs face relative to Prop 209. But otherwise, the requirement is effectively the same. It's that backward-looking annual report and the forward-looking annual plan. Next slide, please. So what is Prop 209? It's more commonly known by its effect on ending affirmative action in 1996. It was on the ballot, Prop 16 on the November ballot this last year would have reversed Prop 209, but that did not pass. So it still stands. It's influential in what it means for California public agencies in terms of restrictions on public contracting, employment, and education. Institutions like, EBCE as a public agency cannot consider race, sex, color, ethnicity, or national origin in any of those selections. And so as that pertains to supplier diversity, that's public contracting. And so what that translates into is, we can never consider these factors in our procurement decisions at any scale. And so the supplier diversity program, it's exclusively concerned with business opportunities for diverse and disadvantaged businesses. And there's a little bit of a mismatch there in terms of what we're able to do and what the intent of the program is. So we have to get a little bit creative. And so given the restriction, on CCAs as public agencies, this does affect, our reporting. The numbers are not as good given as they're effectively coincidence. And, some of the reporting sections are about goal setting, more on the annual plan, goal setting, target setting. We cannot engage in that because of Prop 209. And so some of the sections are just not applicable to CCAs. And so, that's kind of shows up in the reports, the sections looking a little bit different than the IOUs or the other utilities. So in terms of, the actual results and activities, in terms of our 2020 results, there were not, the most exciting numbers, just as a result of these Prop 209 restrictions. In terms of the percentage of spend with diverse suppliers relative to our net procurement, that is basically all dollars out the door, hold salaries and benefits. That's really driven by two main factors. One is Prop 209, we can't exhibit preference. And the other is 98% of our procurement is on power procurement, of which, I don't think it's of much surprise that there are fewer total suppliers and very few diverse suppliers. So, while the IOUs also have little to show in terms of, power procurement from diverse suppliers, their share of net procurement spent on power procurement is a bit smaller than our 98%. So, that leaves us with only about 2% for other goods and services that might come from diverse suppliers, as a result of them just winning the RFP or being a local small business that we support because they're a local Alameda County business. So, it's a lot of context on not supplier diversity, but a very important influence, and one that the CCAs, we worked to kind of align on our narrative, which actually leads well into the next slide, please. So despite some of these restrictions that are imposed by Prop 209, the process of this first year of supplier diversity reporting did also open up opportunities for additional avenues of CCA collaboration. And from a technical perspective, there was effectively an ad hoc working group organized through the Cal CCA compliance group to ensure that all the CCAs had alignment on the reporting requirements, the different tables, and language on the Prop 209 restrictions. So that will be quite clear and might potentially lend itself to finding a way to better work with how CCAs are set up relative to the goals of supplier diversity. But from a more programmatic perspective, also identified some opportunities for outreach and education efforts to different contractor networks to just talk about Go 156 and help folks be aware of the supplier clearinghouse and also get certified should they be eligible and interested in some support. So some exciting new things there. Next slide, please. Thank you. So what was in the 2020 report that we submitted at the first of the month? As I said, the numbers of all of our suppliers that we spent money with in calendar year 2020, the report is based on a calendar year. There were 7 certified suppliers for a total of just over $300,000. That's kind of pennies in comparison to our, about $400 million in the year. Like I said, 98% of that 400 million was on power. So, these 7 suppliers, we identified them as being eligible. We sent out a questionnaire. Some of them responded and identified themselves that way. But we also just kind of had to do a pretty manual cross-reference to the supplier to the supplier clearinghouse to identify them. But going forward, we'll once a contract is in place, or even for smaller purchases, once those are in place, we can ask that information, but we never do that before a contract, just to make sure that we are compliant with Prop 209. And so, other than the actual spend, and there are a number of tables that the CPUC asks for basically that same spend to be looked at in different slices. It also looks at program activities. What did we do relative to supplier diversity? And things we highlighted were the CCA collaboration, which I referenced on the last slide, solicitation language, so adding language to all of our solicitations that describes Go 156 and our reporting requirement, This will be a permanent installment going forward. Our local purchasing, we can and do and have a clear commitment to supporting local businesses to the greatest degree we can. We make that very explicitly clear. Labor and workforce development, highlighting some of our growing workforce development partnerships and opportunities, as well as union and local labor preferences. We highlight our community grants and scholarships. That includes the community innovation grants, local sponsorships, as well as for 2020, a lot of the COVID-19 relief grants that we made, as well as the supplier diversity questionnaire. So that's what I referenced in terms of sending out information to gather data that we need for the report. But we also this year, help with from JP and his team using that as an opportunity to gather more information on workforce development and local job creation opportunities. So this will be an improving process going forward in terms of gathering that data. But I think we've already had a lot of learning just in this first year. And the final is the certification support that I referenced. So, offering support to our existing contractors in getting certified should they be eligible, because a number of them who completed the questionnaire did raise their hand and say, hey, I'm eligible, I'm interested in this, thanks for letting us know. And so following up with them and helping them get certified so they can be in the clearinghouse. Last slide, we're getting real close to the end here. Thank you. Okay, so the second half of the plan of the report is the annual plan for the year looking forward. So for this year, I kind of split this slide left and right in terms of kind of continued efforts, things that we're already doing, kind of no changes there. They're already very much in line with what we can do relative to supplier diversity. On the right side, some kind of expanded efforts and some new efforts. Again, it's all about finding an innovative way to progress the purpose of the program while staying in the bounds of Prop 209. And so on the left side, those are items I just mentioned. So for the sake of time, we'll just move to the right side in terms of these newer items. So diversified outreach, working to expand our solicitation lists so that they actively are including affinity groups and chambers of commerce to ensure that, we have wider awareness of our contracting and procurement opportunities. We're also exploring a certified subcontractor identification support. So for any of our existing prime contractors that need subcontractors to fulfill their work for their EBCE contract, if they have interest and say, yeah, we want to, as our own private company, use a certified diverse supplier for our subcontracting, we can help them basically just kind of sort through the supplier clearinghouse, obviously not requiring that, not treating them any better or worse for their actions there, but providing that as an option. So we're exploring what that might look like, but that could be another way that we could support those businesses, kind of indirectly, as well as the CCA collaboration I mentioned. So this is effectively what I touched on earlier, a specific call out for likely participation in MCE's Certify and Amplify workshop. They've now voluntarily held that for the past couple of years to get the word out about Go 156 and to support contractors in pursuing certification. So that kind of being an annual installment kind of workshop day that we can really rally around for the certification and as well as just our ongoing outreach and education, solicitation information about supplier diversity. Just one last slide, just a high level note. Move to the next, please. Yeah, just on local spend. Obviously, that is a huge commitment of EBCEs, and so we can and do prioritize spend with businesses that are located in our community. And so, staff will be coming to the board and to the CAC, as we are discussing the budget in the coming months. So that is the presentation. I know there's a lot of kind of background information there, but wanted to provide that and see if y'all have any questions or comments.
Thank you, Vanessa. I'm going to go, as usual, to the public first. I do see one hand raised.
Yes, I am unmuting Jessica Tovar now.
Thank you.
Hi, Jessica Tovar with East Bay Clean Power Alliance. Thank you so much, Vanessa, for your presentation. Yeah, as somebody who worked fighting to Proposition 209, certainly a huge problem, and it's a shame that that didn't get repealed this last year. But I will say that I appreciate the use of SLEB, the small local emerging business criteria. And we do have an idea of, well, we're wondering if this would be helpful. Would it be helpful to like prioritize perhaps zip codes within Alameda, Tracy area, like specific communities that are, clearly low income, underemployed, to add to the criteria of prioritization for jobs? Is that possible? Trying to think about other ways of inclusion of hiring people from the community who could use this work within the East Bay Community Energy Program. So just an idea. I don't know if that's possible, but that was what we came up with. Thank you.
Thank you, Jessica. Vanessa, I'm going to also go to our panelists, but as you can think about whether or not that going after zip code level is something that seems it might be feasible, at least on the face of it. I'd appreciate knowing that. But first, I'm going to go to the panel. Do we have any questions or comments from the CAC members? Monica.
No questions, just thank you, Vanessa, for the report. Actually, I saw a similar report that Silicon Valley Clean Energy put together for its board directors, and I'll have to admit this is much better, and I actually understand it, but don't tell my boss that. And I might borrow from it, but it was really, very well done. Thank you so much.
I'm definitely going to tell Garish that.
Thanks, Monica.
Thank you, Monica. Cynthia?
Let's see, yes, okay, I'm unmuted. I wanted to say also that I thought it was a very good report also, and that you are trying to find ways to outreach. So I thought it was very good. Thank you.
Thank you, Cynthia. Okay, hearing nobody else. Vanessa, what about this idea of zip code kind of thing? Is that considered targeting?
I mean, we'd have to run that down with council, but I mean, I think it's something we could explore. But again, it does have to kind of be legally vetted. But I think, in terms of, I don't know if Jessica was referring to a workshop or workforce development in terms of job creation, but there's still some learning to extract from our questionnaire responses relative to workforce development opportunities and job creation from the contractors themselves. So, I think more to come there in collaboration with JP's team, but definitely I took the note to look into.
Great, thank you. All right, anything else from the CAC? If not, I'm going to move us to our last item. Nope, hearing none. Our last item of the night is member and staff announcements, including any request to place items on future agendas. Monica, your hand is still up. I don't know if that's a leftover. Nope, it was a leftover. All right. Any staff announcements or any CAC member announcements? Going once, going twice. All right, hearing none. I'm going to call us adjourned. Our next meeting is Monday, April 19th at 6 p.m. Thank you all.
Thanks all.
Thank you, Mary. Good night.
Bye.
Thank you. Good night.